This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Testimony about his erratic behavior on January 6th and his role in inciting violence. Even a senior House Republican is now predicting indictments. Also tonight, NATO moves to expand its membership and strengthen its forces in Europe. President Biden says the alliance is doing exactly what Vladimir Putin did not want. This, as new video of a deadly mall attack drives home Putin's brutality while he keeps making new gains in his war against Ukraine. We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room. We begin with the fallout from the most damning and alarming testimony yet in the January 6th investigation. We're getting new reaction right now to what Cassidy Hutchinson said under oath and the possible criminal consequences for former President Trump. Let's go right to our congressional correspondent, Ryan Nobles. He's up on Capitol Hill. Ryan, I understand we just got a new statement a little while ago from Cassidy Hutchinson's lawyer.
That's right, Wolf. And this comes while she is receiving some criticism from her fellow Republicans and those who are very closely aligned with the former President Donald Trump. But despite that criticism, Hutchinson is not backing down. According to this statement from her attorneys, Ms. Hutchinson stands by all of the testimony that she provided yesterday under oath. And that testimony she provided, Wolf, it was very damning for Donald Trump and those close to his orbit.
One day after a bombshell hearing featuring former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson,
You swear?
tonight one senior House Republican telling CNN this testimony will lead to indictments, pointing to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and possibly even Trump. The January 6th Select Committee signaling their investigation and what they have to reveal is far from done.
We have serious legal concerns if we go up to the Capitol that day.
Hutchinson delivered close to 2 hours of damaging details of conduct by the former president and his closest advisors that could be damaging politically and open the door to legal liability.
Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
The committee wants to hear more, zeroing in on Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who was at the center of much of Hutchinson's testimony. Vice Chair, Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney tweeting, "It's time for Mr. Cipollone to testify on the record." Legal experts warning there could be risk for Cipollone, but opportunity for the committee.
If I were his counsel, there's no way that he would testify. I mean, he is got enormous exposure, but on the other hand, he has a lot of leverage to negotiate with Congress, to negotiate with the Justice Department, even for possible immunity.
As more evidence is revealed, the pressure is increasing on the Department of Justice to act. Members of the committee openly saying they believe Trump committed a crime.
I think the evidence we've displayed over the course of our hearings, there's no doubt in my mind that he was involved in criminal activity.
The committee also accusing Trump loyalists of putting pressure on potential witnesses, bordering on witness tampering.
I think that that's something that should be looked at by our committee and potentially by the Department of Justice.
Meanwhile, some Republicans are pushing back, questioning Hutchinson's credibility. Trump himself, clearly watching the hearing, claimed, quote, "I hardly know who this person, Cassidy Hutchinson, is." Trump's former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, rushing to Hutchinson's defense, saying, quote, "I know her. I don't think she is lying."
And the committee continues to say that their investigation is ongoing. They're, of course, asking for many people or more people to come forward and provide any information that they think would be important. And those interviews are continuing. Wolf, in just the last hour, CNN has learned that the campaign the committee deposed today for several hours Sean Dolman, who is the former CFO of the Trump campaign. This is someone who would have a lot of insight into the fundraising tactics of the campaign after the 2020 election and how that money is spent. That, of course, a key focus of the January 6th Select Committee.
Potentially very, very significant indeed. Ryan Nobles up on Capitol Hill. Thanks very much. Let's bring in our legal, political, and law enforcement experts right now. Jamie Gangel, behind the scenes, do Trump allies realize how damning this testimony was?
You know, Wolf, I don't think you even have to go behind the scenes. We just heard Mick Mulvaney there. Also, the New York Post, a traditional ally of Trump, headline, tyrant Trump. The Washington Examiner, also conservative, unfit for power again. I spoke last night, today, to many Republican sources. They all said to me that the testimony was devastating, and they felt that Cassidy Hutchinson, from the person they dealt with when she was in legislative affairs, had been someone who was very loyal to Trump, a true believer. That said, they also said that they're concerned that this may not be getting through to the Trump base. We'll see that in the polls.
You know, it's interesting, Gloria. Mick Mulvaney, the former Trump acting White House chief of staff, he was just on with Jake Tapper. I want to play this clip. Listen to this.
If you take what Cassidy Hutchinson said at face value, then Donald Trump knew that the protesters had weapons and encouraged them to go to the Capitol anyway. That was stunning to me. I've been defending the president over the course of the last year, even though I quit my job over the way he conducted himself during the riot. I never really thought until yesterday that he was even capable of inciting the riot.
I'm sure he's not the only Trump associate who feels like that.
No, there are lots, as Jamie is talking about. The question is, when are people going to start talking publicly about this? And, you know, you see Mulvaney doing it, and you see editorial pages doing it. The testimony yesterday was devastating. We learned that the president was directly told by his Secret Service that, yes, there's going to be violence, the potential for violence, that his staff was told about 15 times. And so this will kind of seep in, and you'll have to see what it does to people who are running for president, whether it becomes an issue in a presidential campaign, whether Republican candidates start talking about Donald Trump as unfit for office. I think the big picture here is this question. When voters look at Donald Trump now, hearing all of what they heard yesterday and before, will they now say to themselves, yeah, I'd like to see that guy back in the Oval Office, the guy who flung the plate against the wall? That's who I would like to see in the Oval Office. I think that's a question voters are going to ask themselves. And yes, the base may say, never mind.
The base may always be there, but will other Republicans say it's time to move on?
Right. I mean, it's Donald Trump without the crazy. That may be what they want.
Jeffrey Toobin, our senior legal analyst. Jeffrey, how much more likely are criminal charges after Hutchinson's testimony yesterday?
Definitely more likely. Not guaranteed by any means, but definitely more likely, given the the connection between the former president's statements and the violence that took place on the Capitol. The nexus between the two just got a lot closer. But I just have a question about these Republican critics of Trump. Do any of them actually have names? You know, Mick Mulvaney is like, you know, he's out of politics. I haven't heard one elected official who's still running except for Liz Cheney, who is critical on the record. I think they're a bunch of cowards. I think they're totally terrified of Trump. And the idea that they're willing to talk to journalists on background, so what? I think they are that Donald Trump still runs that party, and everyone in it who has to face the voters is still terrified.
Let's see what happens in a Republican primary, though, Jeffrey. Let's see what Chris Christie starts saying publicly, for example, or what Ron DeSantis, if he's running, starts saying publicly. That'll bring it out, I think.
But they haven't said it yet.
No, they have not. I totally agree with you.
Let's see if they do. You know, Jonathan Wackrow is with us, himself a former Secret Service agent. There's a dispute, as you know, Jonathan, about Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony about what happened in Trump's car in that SUV when he wanted to be taken to the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. You're, as I said, a former Secret Service agent. Does this put the Secret Service right now in a tough spot to clarify what exactly happened? We heard what Cassidy Hutchinson had to say.
Well, this puts the Secret Service in a very uncomfortable spot right now because they don't like to be in the media in part of the story. They want to focus on protection. But what they did do is they came out and they said they will make those agents who were available in the vehicle, available for testimony under oath. So again, we'll get firsthand account of exactly what did happen, whether or not there was a lunge or any type of assault against a Secret Service agent. But what the testimony yesterday did confirm was that the Secret Service went through a process to assess the risk of actually going up to the Capitol. And I think that's a very critical point to key in on right now, is that well before the group from the Ellipse moved to the Capitol, they were already assessed as being an elevated threat. So the special agent in charge is thinking about two things: likelihood and consequence. What is the likelihood that violence would escalate at the Capitol? He made the determination, a very high likelihood. And what would the consequences be? Knowing that there were armed individuals on the outside of the fence line, understanding the makeup and composure of that crowd that was moving up there, the consequences would be very high. So the determination was made basically on a risk assessment not to bring the president up there. Now, this leads to why wasn't that type of intelligence relayed to the Capitol Police, that because of the threat environment we're not bringing the president? Those questions remain to be answered.
The Secret Service's job is to protect the president of the United States, even when that president may not necessarily fully appreciate the dangers that exist at that particular time. All right, guys, everybody stand by. Just ahead, Vladimir Putin's bloody invasion backfires as NATO now formally invites both Finland and Sweden to join the NATO alliance. Stay with us. You're in the Situation Room.
From the tiniest warbler to the mightiest whale shark, nature is on the move, but natural paths are under threat. Now meet incredible conservationists, helping species cross highways, span flyways, and get from A to B.
This is nature's highway, and we must protect it.
Call to Earth, protecting nature's highways.
Saturday on CNN.
I was trafficked at the age of 18. I was a single young mom trying to figure out how to put myself through school. I was lured off of a college campus in Eugene, Oregon, and I was trafficked to Las Vegas mainly for nearly 6 years. My name's Rebecca Bender, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Rebecca Bender Initiative. The way that we mentor survivors of human trafficking is through our initiative called the Elevate Academy. Elevate Academy is really a holistic school that invites survivors to join a cohort of other people just like them. They get a mentor, they get a life coach. We help take them through a number of classes, some of which are really about deeper levels of healing. When I was able to finally escape from my trafficker, I can remember during that time I had been traded and sold between 3 different traffickers. I had 2 men tattoo their names on my back like a piece of cattle. I have been to jail multiple times. Had my face broken in 5 places. I was really hopeless and I didn't know how I was going to get out. Finally, a federal investigation led to my trafficker's arrest, and I went home to a family that was really supportive. But we know in this fight against trafficking that that's not the case for everybody. So not only am I really grateful, but I'm also really determined to help communities learn how to be that family for survivors that are trying to rebuild their lives.
Advancement. Adaptation. New Marketplace Middle East.
Find out why water is the new blue gold.
Marketplace Middle East. Saturday on CNN.
Tonight, President Biden is hailing a major international breakthrough, NATO formally, officially inviting both Sweden and Finland to join the NATO alliance as it bolsters forces on its eastern flank. CNN's senior White House correspondent Phil Mattingly is traveling with the president in Madrid right now at the NATO summit. Phil, these are very, very dramatic moves for both NATO and the United States. Update our viewers.
Yeah, well, the last 24 hours have given an unbelievable window into a dramatically scaled, in a very different manner, security landscape than has existed in this alliance over the course of perhaps the past decade, a decade where at times it seemed adrift or listless. That is very much not the case now. In the last day leading up to and during this NATO summit, on the U.S. side, the security posture has dramatically expanded, a surge in air, land, and sea resources and troop deployments that hasn't existed since the Cold War. It has been matched by many of the international partners here. And you've also seen perhaps the most important element of all, and that is the formal invitation to two new members of NATO. Two new members of NATO who long had resisted the idea because their populations weren't for it, because their leaders didn't think it was worthwhile, or perhaps would necessitate a response from President Putin. No longer. Finland and Sweden are officially on the pathway to membership. For Finland's case alone, Wolf, that's 800 miles of new border with Russia that will soon be occupied by a part of the NATO alliance. Sweden leaving its long effort to stay neutral in these types of situations, all because of what transpired over the course of the last 4 months. I think that's the biggest takeaway when you talk to U.S. officials here. President Biden came to office trying to bring the alliance back together, trying to make the claim that America was back and would lead the European and transatlantic alliances back to a place they weren't with his predecessor, but nobody has forced that like President Putin. It is very clear President Putin wanted a weak or fractured NATO. He's gotten the exact opposite, Wolf.
Yeah, it's obviously very, very clear. A major blunder on the part of Putin, to be sure. The NATO leadership deserves a lot of credit for their willingness to go ahead and do what they're doing. Phil Mattingly in Madrid, thank you very much. Let's get some more right now from our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward. She's also joining us from the NATO summit in Madrid. Clarissa, we just heard, I understand from Putin himself, he's denying responsibility for that shocking missile attack on that Ukrainian shopping mall that killed a lot of people. We're showing our viewers the devastating video from that attack. What can you tell us? What is Putin saying?
So this was President Putin meeting in Turkmenistan with a group of Caspian leaders and addressing for the first time publicly this horrendous attack that you're showing that video of. There are 18 people killed in this shopping mall, many others still unaccounted for. CNN's own Selma Abdulaziz was at the site herself and saw it with her own eyes today, and yet President Putin is maintaining that Russia had nothing to do with it and that Russia does not kill civilians. Take a listen to what he said.
Our army does not attack any civilian infrastructure site. There's no need. We have every capability of knowing what is situated where.
Well, of course, that raises the question, Wolf, if they know what's situated where, why is it then that Russia has consistently hit civilian targets? We know about the hospital, of course, in the city of Mariupol, the maternity hospital. There have been bread lines and many other civilian targets that have been hit. He also addressed during that press conference the issue of Finland and Sweden now being on a sort of fast track to joining NATO. He says that Russia does not have a problem with this, although he did attack NATO's, quote, imperial ambitions, saying that the West is trying to impose supremacy, also saying that the West does not have a real vested interest in Ukraine's well-being, but is only engaged with this issue of the conflict in Ukraine because it's seeking to further its own interests. He did, however, add one caveat on the subject of not caring about Finland and Sweden joining NATO. He said that if NATO moves any weaponry or military installations into either of those countries, and Russia has a border more than 800 miles long, Wolf, with Finland, that would require some symmetrical response from Russia, Wolf.
We'll see what happens on that front. All right, Clarissa Ward in Madrid, thank you very, very much. Coming up, Will former President Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, finally testify before the January 6th Select Committee? I'll ask the White House attorney at the center of the Watergate scandal, John Dean, what it would mean for this incredibly important investigation.
This is a really important story.
My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN.
Assalamu alaikum. Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this.
Ничего страшного.
Okay.
This is the front line.
On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about.
A lot of people are wondering why.
You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon. Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present.
The human cost is right here.
And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing.
I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine.
This is
CNN.
Interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smerconish, Saturday on CNN.
This is CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
Out front tonight, a potential breakthrough in treating coronavirus.
We've gotten very little help from the federal government.
Could all this spending lead to a bigger economic crisis? One of our viewers saw you last night on the show. She says she's going to pay your rent this month. Shut up. And I want to go now to an incredible story of survival. Would you do it all again in terms of being a nurse, knowing that that could put you at risk for this?
I want to help people more than I ever have.
Aaron Burnett out front, tonight on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Tonight, the January 6th Select Committee may be more eager than ever to question former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone. The testimony by ex-White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson revealed new information about Cipollone's actions and fears on January 6th. Brian Todd is looking into all of this for us. Brian, as we've seen in the past, the president's top legal advisor can certainly play a pivotal role in a congressional investigation.
Right, Wolf. One expert we interviewed today said the White House counsel is at the heart of almost every major initiative a president engages in. Their role is to advise on legal strategy. But as we've learned regarding Pat Cipollone and another famous case, they can get drawn into so much more. June 25th, 1973. Former White House counsel John Dean appears before the Senate committee investigating Watergate and gives explosive testimony about the planning for the Watergate break-in, the cover-up, and other criminal activity undertaken by his former boss, President Richard Nixon, and his aides.
I began by telling the president that there was a cancer growing on the presidency.
Dean was implicating Nixon, other officials, and even himself in the Watergate scandal, a crucial moment in the demise of the Nixon presidency. Dean later pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice charges and served prison time.
He's a hero because history remembers him largely for having gone and spoken the truth and helped, save the democracy that was under threat during Watergate.
Contrast John Dean with former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone. Cassidy Hutchinson, a former aide to Trump's chief of staff Mark Meadows, testified that Cipollone was in close touch with her on January 6th and desperately tried to keep the then president from going up to Capitol Hill with the rioters.
Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, "Please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen."
Hutchinson said Cipollone was concerned that Trump could later be accused of obstructing justice or obstructing the electoral count. Trump ended up not going up to Capitol Hill that day. But Hutchinson said Cipollone issued other dire warnings to Trump and Mark Meadows as the Capitol attack unfolded.
Pat said something to the effect of, and very clearly had said this to Mark, something to the effect of, "Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands."
Earlier, Cipollone had reportedly pushed back on other plans by Trump to use the power of the presidency to overturn the 2020 election results. But unlike John Dean, we've not heard from Pat Cipollone. He's appeared for a closed-door interview with the House committee investigating January 6th, but has not agreed to testify publicly, drawing criticism from the panel's vice chair.
We think the American people deserve to hear from Mr. Cipollone personally.
The analysts we spoke to say Cipollone, so far, hasn't gone out on a limb like Dean did. Former federal prosecutor Shan Wu believes Cipollone should have contacted other cabinet members about Trump's behavior or should have resigned.
I mean, you're the White House counsel. You really have quite a solemn duty to not only advise the president, but to protect the office of the presidency.
Analysts say one thing that adds to the enormous pressure of being a White House counsel in the middle of a big scandal is that many of them simply don't have the background for it. Former prosecutor Shan Wu told us White House counsels often don't come into the job with experience in criminal cases. Often, they're trained to deal with policy issues. But when they get thrown into a big scandal and may have to act as a whistleblower in a criminal matter at the White House, Wolf, that is a different game entirely.
Certainly is. Brian Todd reporting. Good report. Thank you very, very much. Let's discuss what we just heard. The former Nixon White House counsel, John Dean, is joining us right now. He's a CNN contributor. John, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, Cipollone warned back on January 6th that people are going to die if Trump didn't act to try to quell the disturbance there. Does Cipollone have an obligation now to share what he knows publicly under oath with the committee?
I think he does. If the committee wants to do it publicly, that's the committee's choice. He doesn't have an option to say, I'll do it privately, if the committee thinks it educates the public. I think also, Wolf, what happened post-Watergate is the rules of the game for lawyers changed. They had been required to take an oath to the Constitution even before Watergate. But post-Watergate, the ethical rules changed. And this is a situation where Cipollone is playing dangerously close to being in ethical violations for his silence. He needs to get out and protect democracy. That's one of the post-Watergate requirements. So I hope he will come forward voluntarily. If not, the committee should put a subpoena on him and make him go to court and give some excuse why he shouldn't, because it's necessary at this point.
On that point, this morning, the Select Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney tweeted this. Let me put it up on the screen. Any concerns he has about the institutional interests of his prior office are outweighed by the need for his testimony. John Dean, do you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. He can clarify a lot of things that are not clear right now. He can shed light that will help educate the public. He has advised that there was criminal behavior going on. What's to say that that criminal behavior ever stopped or that he withdrew from it? I think for his own safety, he should clarify that, how he stayed out of the two conspiracies that appear to be very much involved, actually 2 or 3 conspiracies, that he should address and fill in the committee and explain to the public.
You were among the younger staffers to testify during Watergate. What does it say to you that it's another young staffer, Cassidy Hutchinson, who had the courage to come forward and tell the truth while so many Trump insiders are refusing to cooperate?
You know, it seems the older you are, the more vested you become in your career and where you're going to go from the White House. I think Cipollone's got that problem. He's got a large family to support. He looks towards Republican clients probably and his influence in Washington, and he's worried about damaging all that. But I'll tell you, if we don't address the problems that this issue raises with Trump in January 6th, we're not going to have much of a democracy he needs to worry about. So I think he ought to get forward and testify about this and help put it to rest.
If Cipollone is watching us right now, what would be your additional message to him?
I would tell him, Pat, the truth is your friend, and the truth is something we all need to hear.
Yeah, well, let's see if he accepts that advice. John Dean, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Just ahead, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer confirms tomorrow will be his final day on the bench, with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson waiting in the wings to take the oath. We'll be right back.
I'm Ben Wiedemann in Ukraine, and this is CNN.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
The missile struck right here. What is your interpretation of Putin's intention?
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
What does President Putin think he has achieved in Ukraine to date?
We just want to say stop to Vladimir Putin.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
What are you looking at for the future with these additional formations that you've talked about, and where? What are the UN and other countries doing for you? Is it enough?
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
We are doing this for our very survival.
What do you think a peace or a ceasefire or an end to this looks like?
And fully understand what's at stake.
We have will, we have guts, and we are fighting like hell.
Amanpour, tonight on CNN.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessment. Do you now regret that?
It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
Legal battles over abortion are mounting tonight, nearly a week after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade. CNN national correspondent Erica Hill is following all the ramifications of the decision.
We're taking this fight back to the courts.
Wisconsin is the latest state to sue over pre-Roe abortion laws, asking the court to strike an 1849 ban, which outlaws nearly all abortions with no exception for rape or incest, noting that it contradicts more recent state laws.
Those statutes are directly inconsistent with Wisconsin's 19th century abortion ban. It can't be both legal and illegal to provide an abortion to protect the health of a mother.
All abortion services in Wisconsin stopped last Friday when Roe was overturned.
My body, my choice.
In Texas, a temporary reprieve after a restraining order allowed some clinics to resume abortions until around the 6-week mark of pregnancy. North Dakota, one of 13 states with so-called trigger laws, announcing its abortion ban will go into effect July 28th. A federal judge ruled Tennessee can ban the procedure after 6 weeks, starting right now, well before the state's more restrictive trigger law takes effect in mid-August, with no exceptions for rape or incest.
This is a critical moment in our history. How we respond will speak to how we view the rights, the dignity, and the well-being of women everywhere.
Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra pledging his department will do everything it can, including increasing access to medication abortions, though in reality, federal options are limited. In states where abortion is still legal, officials are sending a clear message. Nevada's governor signing an executive order stating there will be no cooperation for out-of-state warrants related to violations of reproductive health care laws. That follows a similar order in California.
Governors clearly have the authority to dictate what their state executive branches do. Ultimately, however, it's really hard for anybody in a state that allows abortion to protect their citizens against prosecution.
And Wolf, just a short time ago, the HHS Office of Civil Rights issued some new guidance in this post-Roe world, specifically dealing with privacy and your personal health information, noting HIPAA does not protect all that information. So if a disclosure is required because of another law, and that request comes through legal means, be it a court order or a warrant, your personal information can be turned over without authorization. They also address concerns about data that's stored on a personal device. We've heard a lot about period tracking apps. HHS said they heard a lot of concern about that. What they say is that information generally not protected by HIPAA. If you are concerned about it, though, they have some new tips there and guidance. You can find those, Wolf, at hhs.gov.
Erica Hill reporting for us. Erica, thank you very much. This all happening on the eve of a historic moment. Right now, the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer will retire at noon Eastern tomorrow, and Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will be sworn in as the 116th Justice, the first African-American woman to sit on the highest court in the land. Let's get some legal analysis right now from Supreme Court biographer Joan Biskupic, our legal analyst, who's watching this all of us unfold. So we know that this will be Justice Breyer's last day. Tomorrow he leaves.
Right. And today, on his last full day, he actually pulled out a win. In a 5-4 case, he was in the majority. And that's a rarity for liberals these days, as we just heard from Erica's report on the Dobbs decision.
He pulled out a majority in a case involving a military vet who was trying to sue the state of Texas, trying to get his better job back after he had returned from service. So that was a good thing that happened to Stephen Breyer today. And then after that, he met in private for the last time in a conference room off the chambers of the Chief Justice to vote on cases, finishing up business from this term and looking ahead to next term. Wolf, he'll still have an office at the court, but he's going to have to move into a smaller chambers. He'll have to take down all these. I think you've been in his chambers. He's got all these great antique books lining the shelves he inherited from his uncle on philosophy and other humanities subjects. He'll move those to a smaller office, but he will no longer be one of 9.
I have been in his chambers over there at the U.S. Supreme Court. It's, you know, and we'll finally see this new justice sworn in tomorrow, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
That's right. She will be sworn in at noon. It will be live streamed to people who want to watch it. And the Chief Justice John Roberts is going to administer the constitutional oath. And then Stephen Breyer, who once was her boss, she was a law clerk to Justice Breyer, he will administer the judicial oath. And the judicial oath is nice. It's got some very evocative phrases about language about administering justice and doing equal right to rich and poor. And she, of course, will be much different from Stephen Breyer just in terms of demographics. She will be the first African-American woman. She's only 51. He's 83. She'll bring a whole new temperament to the bench. And if she serves as long as he serves, we're looking at like another generation and a half.
Could be 30 or 40 years down the road.
Right.
Lifetime appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. It certainly does end, though, with Breyer leaving, the Clinton imprint on the highest court. And I was a White House correspondent when we broke the news that it was Stephen Breyer he was going to nominate for the Supreme Court.
I was a Supreme Court correspondent then for the Post, and you beat us. But I'm still not holding this against
Every time I see Stephen Breyer, he reminds me that I broke that story.
Right. Well, good for you. And now he's leaving. But it does show look at what's happened in the last 28 years. Stephen Breyer was part of a less polarized era. He always wanted to do compromise. That's what he was all about. He comes from a time when he thought that both sides could work together. And that was his style. And his colleagues are going to miss that. The Chief Justice is really going to miss that. He was a real partner to John Roberts. But there'll just be a whole new dynamic, and we'll see what unfolds over the next 28 years, Wolf.
History unfolding, as we like to have that front row seat to history, and we have it. Thanks very much, Joan, for that excellent analysis. Coming up, a federal judge has just handed down a very lengthy prison sentence to singer R. Kelly, who was convicted on sex trafficking charges. We have details, and we'll share them with you right after the break.
I'm Paula Hancock in Seoul. This is CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
You've seen this explosion of life, and life has come back because of a new habitat that's been created with a whole load of big animals. So we went from this very intensive conventional farming system to a free-roaming, animal-based habitat creation project, rewilding.
One of the things you can do is introduce free-roaming herbivores, and all of them, the way they disturb the land, the way they trample and rootle, everything that they do has a hugely important knock-on effect, a sort of domino effect for biodiversity. We've seen here some of the rarest species in Britain. An amazing species that we had never had here before is the turtle dove. And we're probably the only piece of land in the UK where turtle dove numbers are actually rising.
This butterfly is an incredibly rare butterfly. Here you can see it in their hundreds.
It's about kicking off natural processes again in a system, and then as human beings trying to stand back from it as much as possible and let nature perform.
To see a landscape in your own country and what you've been missing suddenly come to life has been this extraordinary revelation, this surprise, this feeling of just joy that we can do it.
We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know?
People are so exhausted. Just going to help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy. I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you. Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories on Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa.
Singer R. Kelly has been sentenced to 30 years in prison following his conviction on federal racketeering and sex trafficking charges. A jury found Kelly guilty of 9 counts last September. Prosecutors said Kelly used his celebrity status to target girls, boys, and young women. Kelly's attorney says he's devastated by the sentence, but is prepared to appeal the conviction. Grim new details tonight of what's being called the worst human smuggling event in U.S. history. The San Antonio, Texas police chief saying the floor of a tractor trailer abandoned in the blazing sun was, quote, completely covered in bodies. CNN's Omar Jimenez is working the story for us. Omar, I understand at least 53 people are now confirmed dead. You're there at the scene where this tractor trailer was found. What's the latest?
Yeah, Wolf. Well, when police first got to this scene where dozens and dozens of people were found dead, the San Antonio police chief described what he saw not only as beyond tragic, but borderline indescribable, because they not only had to push through the gruesomeness of what they were seeing up front, but they had to do so to try and find people that had potentially survived this. Take a listen to the police chief.
The floor of the trailer, it was just completely covered in bodies. Completely covered in bodies. There were at least 10 plus bodies outside the trailer, because when we arrived, when EMS arrived, we were trying to find people who were still alive. So we had to move bodies out of the trailer onto the ground.
And that was to try and find survivors, which ultimately there were, but a few of them died later on at the hospital, bringing the death total up to 53. As of right now, there are about 10 or so people still recovering in local hospitals, but of those killed, according to the medical examiner, 40 of them were men, 13 of them were women, and that it's likely going to be a prolonged identification process, even though they have preliminary ones on 37 of them. But that's because they're trying to coordinate between multiple different countries, I should say, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, trying to get IDs on these people. Now, as far as who potentially was involved in this. There was the driver of this truck seen fleeing the scene by police that day, and dispatch audio says he was actually running alongside the railroad tracks here, but that person was eventually detained. The police chief didn't offer further details. And then separately, 2 people were arrested on charges of illegal weapon possession by someone illegally in the United States, but that was because they traced the license plate of this truck to addresses here in San Antonio. No word from authorities on any connection there.
CNN's Omar Jimenez reporting for us. Omar, thank you very much. We're also following the dramatic new political upheaval that's going on in Israel right now, where the outgoing Prime Minister Naftali Bennett says he will not run for re-election in the fall. The Israeli parliament, the Knesset, is preparing a series of votes to dissolve itself following the collapse of the governing coalition, which will trigger new elections. CNN's Hadass Gold is joining us from Jerusalem right now. Hadass, Israel is on the verge of its, 5th election in less than 4 years. Give us the latest.
Well, and it's been a night of political chaos in Israel. The Israeli parliament was originally supposed to vote on its dissolution before midnight, but political squabbling and last-minute deal-making just dragging out the process. At one point, parliament members were even rushed back to the floor late in the evening, only to have that last-minute effort fall apart almost as quickly as it began. Now the parliament is expected to reconvene tomorrow morning to try again and start the process to dissolve itself all over again. Now, once Parliament is officially disbanded, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, who is a centrist, a former journalist, and actually a former anchor, will become the caretaker prime minister the moment the clock strikes 12:01 on Friday, as per the coalition agreement. And new elections will then be triggered in the fall. All of this political upheaval, this chaos, and the new elections presenting a huge opportunity for former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to return to power, even though he faces an ongoing corruption trial. And the polls don't necessarily show that the bloc of parties, his bloc of parties, will have enough votes to secure a majority. But Netanyahu will have one fewer competitor, as you noted. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, in his last few hours as Prime Minister, announcing tonight he will not run in the fall elections and is leaving politics for now, Wolf, saying now is my time to step back a little and look at things from the outside. Wolf.
See what happens. The President of the United States planning a trip in a couple of weeks to Jerusalem. We'll see what happens on that front as well. CNN's Hadass Gold reporting from Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Just ahead, new concerns over tens of thousands of potentially dangerous train crossings all over the United States after a deadly Amtrak crash.
Chicago's South Side can sometimes carry a difficult, if not dangerous, reputation.
The threats in our community are numerous. There's threats of violence with gangs, with family members. There's guns. There's inequities in the system where students can't even go outside.
But in recent years, a new problem has come to light: human trafficking.
Human trafficking is something that affects every single person, no matter what age, no matter what gender, no matter what identity. It affects every single person.
But inside the brick walls of the Curie Metropolitan High School, a talented group of students has decided to do something about it. The students are part of a collective called Performers for Change. They're led by dance instructor Melinda Wilson.
Yes.
For the students, it's a chance to express themselves while educating their classmates. For Wilson, it's a chance to bring what some might consider